Thank you, Paul, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And actually, I wanted to just ask you very informally.
What was that? You still can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Can you guys hear me? Great. Okay.
Right. Cool. You were in the Intelligence Squared debate last night.
I was.
And I had talked to Joseph Kossuth kind of earlier in the day yesterday.
Okay.
So I was trying to warm him up for the conversation.
Did it work?
I'm not sure. I didn't go to the debate, so I wanted to ask you how it went. And you were talking about I might get this a little bit wrong, but whether contemporary art is for the 1%. And maybe you could tell us about the debate and then what you talked about. And
I think the debate turned out really well. I dressed really well. I had a nice suit on. I brought my speech. I gave it, and it was very pleasant. The motion that I was arguing for was that contemporary art excludes the 99%. And I was doing it with Ben Lewis, a wonderful writer and art critic from London. And I'm happy to say that people voted for our motion 64%. And what can we say? We won.
What about the other side?
They were awful. They were really just inarticulate. I don't know what they were talking about. And I think most people realized that they had no idea what they were talking about.
Well, 40% may have.
Well, sometimes we get really seduced by nonsense.
Speaking of nonsense, it's been a couple of years since I've seen you, and also since I've left New York. But you've been fairly involved, from what I understand, with at least thinking about the Occupy movement. Well, maybe I would just let you characterize things that have been happening in New York politically, and how related they are to art making these days.
I would characterize my relationship with Occupy as like anyone else who has relationships with Occupy. I think we were very happy it happened. I wasn't part of the organizing. I would never speak for them. And it's really a movement that came out of a collective frustration that many people felt, that people were losing work, people were losing houses, and they didn't know how to get them back. And it affected not only artists, but regular people. Well, that sounds funny. Artists are regular people, too. In any case, it affected a lot of different people. And so my relationship was that you try to support them however you can. I think their big protest May 1st was important, and hopefully it will continue.
For yourself, is it wrong to say that that the climate in New York in the last couple of years has shifted? I mean, my memories of the place are of it being, pre-2008, there was the Republican demonstrations or against the Republican convention in 2000 in the city, but when I was living there was a kind of absence of public displays of political protest, and so I've just been reading up on the things that I've been missing, and I was reading Claire Tancon's piece about the sort of carnival, the way that the Occupy protests reinvigorate this spirit of carnival in the public forum, and I don't know, I guess I'm trying to make a connection a little bit with some projects that you've done in New Orleans and about the public and public manifestations of discontent. I don't know, where do you situate your practice these days in terms of the public and also maybe the political?
That's a really long question.
Sorry, there was a lot of preface. The question was shorter.
I think I try to live in a way that I feel most comfortable. I think it's hard to live in New York, and I think however people find ways of living so that they can feel engaged and motivated is good. I think it's been hard living in New York because it's so damn expensive. I guess like Hong Kong, I suppose. Is Hong Kong expensive? Yeah, it's fucking hard living here. It's fucking hard living in New York. But even though it's hard to live in places, people find ways of living, and I think that's what motivates people to go to New York, that despite the fact that it's very hard, that it's hard to live there, that you want to make your way through it, because I think if things aren't hard, it isn't that interesting. And I think New York continues to be one of the most interesting cities to live in. I don't know what it's like in Hong Kong, but in New York, it's hard. And people come there because it's hard to try to make their way through it. And it shows through forms of expression that have in them embedded a kind of struggle, whether it's political, social, emotional, or aesthetic. It shows. It reverberates. It has an echo effect. And I think that's why people are there, because they want to express that echo.
Can you just tell us, like I said, I haven't seen you in a couple of years, so I'd love to know what you've been working on recently and what you're working on for the rest of the year.
I stopped making artwork in late 2008, and I haven't made work for a couple years, 3 years. I basically took time off. I was done. I was happy to help people. I was happy to help people install works that I've done before, works that are already in circulation, but I had it, and so I was done. In the meantime, I started a press, much like what you guys are doing. I started publishing books, because I've always wanted to publish books, but I never had the money. Like everything else we want to do, we never have money for it. So how do you do it? Well, you do it by either stealing or selling drugs or finding a cheaper way to do it. And I don't want to sell drugs anymore. And I
don't want you to either.
Thanks. So I found a cheaper way to do it. And the cheaper way to do it was through ebooks. That in 2007, now I feel like I'm going to sell ebooks. In the beginning of 2006, 2007, the iPad came up, and then the Amazon Kindle, and people started buying books as files that you can read. And I thought, well, I don't have to spend $10,000 to publish a book. I can just spend a couple hours programming and then publish it on Apple and Amazon, and then I can make a book. And so that's how I started. So in 2010, I started publishing. I started publishing my own stuff, and then I started publishing other people. The first book that we published that was someone else was the iconic choreographer, filmmaker, Yvonne Rainer. She's 81. Oh, she's going to kill me. She's been dancing since the 60s. She was the legendary dancer who inspired Donald Judd and the Minimalists to do what they do. And she wrote poems. No one knew she wrote poems. So I published her poems. And we're going to continue publishing. This fall, Karen Marta, the wonderful Karen Marta, is co-publishing with me the essays of Saddam Hussein, who wrote 3 essays on democracy in the late 70s. And they're completely perverse and interesting. And who's going to publish the essays of Saddam Hussein? Me. I'm also going to publish an never-before-published interview by Marcel Duchamp. He gave an interview in 1964 to Calvin Tompkins, the biographer of Duchamp. And I'm going to publish this interview that's never been published by Duchamp. And then we're publishing a bunch of ebooks this summer by young artists from New York. So,
this is a 2-question. Are you still thinking of yourself as an artist? And would you be willing to elaborate on why you'd had enough?
I think I think about myself in many things. It's not really up to me, and I kind of don't care. I think if people want to call me an artist, it's perfectly fine. I'm happy to hear it. If people want to call me an asshole, it's perfectly fine too. I don't care, actually. There's a beautiful line. Do people know Marcus Aurelius? Marcus Aurelius was really smart, and one of the best things he said was one should be indifferent to indifferent things. And I think that's a perfect way of understanding what it means to go through the world, so that you can remain calm and interesting, I suppose. I think it's a good thing to remember. What am I doing the rest of the year? I'm going to check email.
Me too. But sorry to go back to this, but why'd you feel like you had enough? I mean, was that a personal thing? Well, obviously it was personal, but
well, look.
This is too much attention?
No, not you guys.
You mean yeah.
This is really, I think I've been very grateful and lucky to show art.
Yep.
I love doing it, but I think, I think we all know, even the things that we love to do, sometimes we have to stop doing it because it's not what you love. It's just natural course of things to change, and I just had enough. I just didn't care.
But in terms of the themes that you've been tackling in your work, do you feel like there's some continuity in what you get to publish, or is publishing allowing you to pursue things intellectually?
I think publishing is pleasurable because I can publish whatever I feel it should be made into a book. I think the Yvonne Rainer book I'm very proud of because everyone knows her as a choreographer and a filmmaker, but no one knew her as a poet. So I felt like I was bringing something new into the world. And also, I think for me, the press is dedicated to writings about artists and artists' writings. And Yvonne Rainer is one of the greatest artists America has ever produced. And her writing is essential for us understanding what it means to be an artist today. So it made perfect sense within the mission of what we do. Duchamp is the same way. Younger artists are the same way. I feel like that's my job.
I mean, it's an interesting way that as we shift our thinking about what it means to be a practicing artist at the moment, that you then start looking at past artists' lives and practices differently.
It's true. I think it's how we learn. I think Duchamp, for instance, he's iconic. I mean, everyone knows Duchamp. But the problem with being an icon is that you don't think about them anymore, precisely because they're an icon. And in many ways, it's a disservice to him, because once you stop thinking about him, you don't realize how complicated and weird the guy was. It's completely bizarre that he's one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, because this man stopped making artwork for 40 years. It's bizarre. And the work that he made was bizarre. It fits in no other category except its own, which is a semblance of its sense of freedom. I think that's really important, and it's hard to remember when he's an icon. I think people only think about him as the anti-artist, which may be true, but it doesn't illuminate exactly what else we can look at based on his experience. And his life experience was extraordinary. He lived a very interesting life, and it helps to understand a work by understanding a person's life. Because his life was the activity of a spirit in a way. And I think if we want something out of art, it's that.
Well, and I also think that it's refreshing in Duchamp's case to think about, the life and work together, so that the art isn't just kind of product or single thing sitting on a wall. I mean, it's also so incongruous to see Duchamp's kind of post-impressionist period, in the late 19th century, and then to imagine the man who, as you say, both gave birth to all of this postmodern conceptual work, whose name comes up all the time, and then who spent his life playing chess. And
I agree. And I think also there's a parallel between Marcel Duchamp and Yvonne Rainer, because they both left in a way. Marcel left art to do something else. Yvonne Rainer in the 70s gave up dancing to concentrate on film. There's a continuity, but it's up to us to see it. They're just living, and I think that's enough for me. But now that they're in the past, in a way, God, Yvonne would hate me saying that. She's not even dead. She's very much alive. But seeing her life, you realize the kind of twists and turns that she made in her life was very compelling. And it's compelling because it's a particular kind of life. It doesn't feel generic at all. It feels like someone following the route of what we imagine we want, which is always changing and different. And it's compelling to see someone live that out, just like Duchamp did.
And in a way, as you're saying like that, it might actually be what's most inspiring about certain artists.
Can I have some of your water?
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm going to let you go in a minute, too.
Okay. I'm happy. I'm okay.
Well, I don't want to belabor the point, but I mean, I'm looking forward to I've seen some of your self-published ebooks, but not Yvonne's yet.
It's $1.99.
I'm there.
You can get it today.
I'm there. Okay. Let's do it. So, and they're available
on Apple and Amazon. Do you have the Yvonne book over there at the bookstore, Alex? What?
Jeez.
That's okay.
Anyway, they're out there.
Distributors, the worst.
Paul, I'd love to talk to you some more, but... All right, copies of Paul's book, Seven Lights.
Alex Galan, who runs the art book booth over there, he has copies of my books, which are more expensive than $1.99, unfortunately. But it's there. Okay.
And they're available to the public.
They're available to the public.
Rock on. Thank you, Paul, for
You're
being
welcome.
with us. Thanks, man.